The Beatles, the rise and fall of the biggest band in history. On January 30th, 1969, four men stepped onto a rooftop in London. It was freezing. The police were on their way, and they were playing a concert that they knew might be their last. This wasn't just a band, this was a religion for a generation. They didn't just change music, they changed the world. But the story of the Beatles isn't just a story of success. It's a story of brotherhood, genius, paranoia, and a slow, painful unraveling. This is the true biography of the Beatles. To understand the Beatles, you have to forget the fame, forget the suits, go back to Liverpool, 1957, a gray industrial port city still scarred by World War II. John Lennon was a troubled teenager, angry, rebellious, raised by his aunt after his mother abandoned him. He formed a skiffle band called the Quarrymen. One day, a 15-year-old kid named Paul McCartney saw them playing at a church picnic. Paul showed John how to tune a guitar. John asked him to join. Then came George Harrison. He was only 14, too young, too quiet, but he could play guitar like a veteran. They were a trio playing in cheap strip club basements in Liverpool. But their real education didn't happen in Liverpool. It happened in the red light district of Hamburg, Germany, playing 8-hour sets, 7 days a week, sleeping in bunkers behind the clubs, surviving on amphetamines. This is where they became a razor-sharp, unstoppable live machine. They had the sound. But they needed two more things to conquer the world: a drummer named Ringo Starr and a local record store manager named Brian Epstein. Brian Epstein looked at these leather-clad swearing rockers and saw dollar signs. He made them trade their leather jackets for tailored suits. He made them stop smoking and eating on stage. He created the mop-top image. Epstein knocked on every door in London. Finally, a producer named George Martin said yes. In 1963, they released I Want to Hold Your Hand. And then, the world broke. When they landed in America in 1964, 73 million people watched them on The Ed Sullivan Show. Beatlemania was a phenomenon that modern pop stars can't even comprehend. They couldn't even hear themselves play over the screaming. Most bands would have milked the teeny bopper formula forever, but the Beatles got bored. In 1965, they stopped touring. They locked themselves in Abbey Road studios with producer George Martin, and they started experimenting. They introduced sitars, they used tape loops, they wrote songs from the perspective of lonely old people and psychedelic dreams. 1967's Sgt. Pepper wasn't just an album, it was a cultural earthquake. It proved that rock and roll could be high art. But as their music expanded, their personal lives began to fracture. They traveled to India to study meditation. But the peace they were looking for didn't last. In August 1967, Brian Epstein, the man who held the band together, died of a drug overdose. The Beatles were lost without him. John brought in Yoko Ono, breaking the unwritten rule that the studio was a band-only zone. Paul, the perfectionist, started trying to control the direction of the band. George, tired of being treated as a junior member, actually quit the band for a few days. By 1969, it was over. The cameras were rolling for a documentary, but they were just capturing a divorce. They barely looked at each other. The magic was dead. Which brings us back to the rooftop. They played one last time, ignoring the police, playing the music that made them great. It was the perfect defiant ending. They walked away at the absolute peak of their powers. John was murdered in 1980. George passed in 2001. But the music is immortal. They sold over 600 million records. They hold the record for most #1 hits. The Beatles weren't just a band of the 60s, they are the blueprint for everything that came after. What's your favorite Beatles song? Is it from the mop-top era or the psychedelic years? Tell me down in the comments. If you enjoyed this biography, hit subscribe for more deep dives into music history. I'll see you in the next